Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Kyle. I'm here with another video. As you know, currently there's an election going on, and even though Joe Biden has been declared the winner of the election, it still hasn't been official, so I'm not going to drop a video of my reaction. Instead, what I will be dropping is, in terms of election, it's my top, the top of all. Before I won, I'm going to say this to every political video. I'm biased towards conservatives, so if Republican wins, then I tend to favor that election more. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into my top 6. Well, it's going to be a top 5, but there's so many crazy elections. Number 6, 1876. Now, 1876 was between Rutherford Hayes versus Samuel Tilden. Now, 1876 is actually an important election. Now, what the election of 1876 is what happens if the electoral college is tied. And so then, when the election was tied, I think it was decided by the Supreme Court in 1876. I could be wrong, but on a vote 8-7, Rutherford Hayes won, even though he lost a popular vote. Now, also, how I'm also going to be grading this is the craziestness and the importance of the election. And the 1876 election wasn't important. Yes, it kind of was an important one because, it was like a decade after the Civil War and Reconstruction was still going on in the South. But, it was totally peaceful. I mean, it was a little bit crazy, but the main reason why it's at number 5 instead of like high on this list is because if African Americans were able to vote in the South, then Rutherford Hayes would have won by a lot against Samuel Tilden. But I mean, and also one of the few elections where the person who lost a popular vote became president. Number 5, 1912 election. Now the 1912 election was a wild one, and it all started with William Howard Taft's presidency, which Theodore Roosevelt was like, I don't like William Howard Taft's presidency. So what he does is he's like, I'm officially running for president after his supporters pressure him to. And in the delegates, in the Republican National Committee, it was actually said that, and Teddy Roosevelt, or Theodore Roosevelt, had more delegates than Taft. But Taft's, friends, people who knew Taft was running the Republican convention. So instead of the deserving winner, which was Teddy Roosevelt, because it was decided on who has the most delegates, and Roosevelt had the most delegates, instead Taft got the nomination because his buddies. But it's not crazy because of that. It's crazy because then Theodore Roosevelt started a third party called the Progressive Party, or the Bull Moose Party, because he got shot. And they create a lot of divide. And then you had Eugene Debs, who was like the most famous socialist in America during that time. And he had no chance of winning, but he could have got votes. And then you had a dark horse candidate who wasn't even favored to win, and who didn't expect to win, and that was Woodrow Wilson. On a 36th ballot, Woodrow Wilson became the nominee, and he only became the nominee because William Jennings Bryan, a guy who was pretty popular, and ran in elections of 1896, 1900, and 1908, but lost all of them. And, it was crazy. And then the results were even crazier. Woodrow Wilson easily became the president of the United States. And remember, but guess what? It's the first time in history where a third-party candidate did better. The first and only time where a third-party candidate did better than a major party. Because I think William Howard Taft only got 7 electoral votes, while Theodore Roosevelt got 100 and something. But I feel like the main reason why Woodrow Wilson won that election is because people were like to Theodore Roosevelt, he doesn't care about making this country better, he just doesn't like Taft, so that's why he ran against him, which was fair enough. Now, number 4, this is actually, this could be high on the list, 1824. Now, 1824 was between 4 candidates, and, it was a lot of candidates, but I'm only going to name 2. and that was John Quincy Adams versus Andrew Jackson. Now, John Quincy Adams, I mean, he didn't have a political party, but he was Henry Clay's party, not the Whig Party, but he called himself National Republicans, while Jackson called himself a Democrat. But this is insane because, first of all, it's the first time in history where the winner of the presidential election did not win the popular vote. In fact, lost the popular vote. But what's so crazy is the results. So since there were so many candidates, a lot of people voted, and I think the minimum to get in order to be elected president during that time was, I think, 130 or something, 100 something. And Andrew Jackson got 99 votes, while John Quincy Adams got 84. And some other dude, it could have been John Jay. I have no idea. Probably not. Maybe not. But regardless, he got good enough electoral votes. So there was 3 candidates. And so then what happens is they go to the House of Representatives, and Henry Clay. And then the second place was John Quincy Adams with 84. And Henry Clay was like, you know what? How about I like John Quincy Adams. Let's go with John Quincy Adams. And John Quincy Adams ended up winning. Now, it could have been because of the corrupt bargain deal. It could have not been. Henry Clay denied it. They both denied it, but that's definitely stuck with John Quincy Adams. So, yeah, it was definitely crazy how Jackson could have won, but he didn't reach enough requirements, and John Quincy Adams somehow won, even though he lost the popular vote and lost the electoral vote, which is the first time in history that both things happened. Or someone who lost the electoral vote somehow became president. Number 3 on this list, 2000. Now, I summed it up all in one word of 2000. Florida. Now, what makes this election so crazy, it was a regular election. The stakes weren't too high. And you started to notice a pattern. The stakes were not too high in these presidential elections. Maybe 1876, but trust me. But in 2000, it was just a regular candidacy. It was Vice President Gore versus Governor Bush. And, it just played out regularly. Bush was a little bit favored. Gore was favored in the, months leading up to the election. But then George Bush kind of had a slim margin of error lead before election night. But then it became that Bush has officially won Florida. Now, Al Gore, of course, won in recounts in Florida because he barely lost Florida, just like what's going on in 2020, and he wouldn't concede. Now, Bush has already claimed victory, so what they did is they continuously counted Florida votes, and whoever won Florida won the election. So it was definitely not over. It's definitely not over. And then it showed that, Al Gore's lead has shrunk to the 300 votes. 300 votes. And then they recounted it again, and then I think Bush had a larger lead, and then they counted the military or the out of country ballots or military ballots, and then Bush had a better lead. And then this had to go to the Supreme Court. An election had to go into the Supreme Court. And then of course Bush was like, hey dude, stop. And so then Bush v. Gore of 2000 decided the presidential election, and they gone with that Florida's continuous recount was unconstitutional, so George W. Bush became president. And just like on his list, a father and son duo only happened 2 times. Guess what? Both of them have been on the list. John Quincy Adams, and then George H.W. Bush, and then John Quincy Adams, John Adams. Now, number 2 on this list. Now, this could be crazier, but, again, I did tell you that the candidate that I wanted to win has won in my number 1. And number 2, it seems most likely that the candidate that I want to win probably lost. Number 2 is 2020. It's this year's election that's still going on. It's not over. Despite what the media says, it's not over. Trump could very much win. He has a 10%, 15% chance of winning, but he definitely still has a chance of winning. But just what happens, what's going to happen in this world with COVID. You have voting, and then you have mail-in ballots because of COVID. So there was a lot on the line. Then you had mail-in ballots, which Trump was like, I don't like it, and Democrats was like, COVID, so we got to, and all the Republicans are like, no, stop this mail-in ballot. All the Democrats are like, mail-in ballot isn't bad. And so then this definitely created a divide. And then, you have all these mail-in ballots, and then Trump looks like he might win, and then Biden all of a sudden goes ahead. Now, what makes this crazier is, of course, there was a lot going on, and it's still going on, COVID and protesting. Now, and it's even crazier now because now Trump is going to the courts and to get a recount on a lot of states. And as of now, a county in Michigan has flipped to Donald Trump, so he could win Michigan. He could also win Florida. He can also win Arizona. So definitely 2020 is probably an amazing election. I remember, watching live streams and, watching on New York Times. I was going to live stream it, but then I realized that it was like 12 o'clock. I had school tomorrow. It was like 1 o'clock. I had school tomorrow. I'm like, yeah, we're not going to know until this morning. But, I'm a little upset that Joe Biden is probably going to win. But to be honest, I'm relieved that's finally over because I had so many terrible dreams. There was so many dreams I had of like, oh my God, Biden's won Georgia, or Biden has won this state and that state, and I was like, and I kind of wanted to stay up to know the results, but I was like, no, I have to go tomorrow. So number one, this is definitely the craziest election in my opinion, of course, and the candidate I wanted to win won, and it so happens to be my favorite president of all time and the person that I claim to be the greatest president of all time. Number one, 1860. Now, 1860, you talk about America being divided now. In 1860, it was 10 times more divided. Now, why was it divided? Because of the issue of slavery. Specifically, the expansion of slavery out west, but slavery was still an issue. And what happened is the Democratic Party became split up with John C. Breckinridge, the current vice president for James Buchanan. I think he was part of the Southern Democrats, while Stephen Douglas, who won against Lincoln in the Senator Illinois, represent the Northern Democrats. Now, of course, this is a little bit of revenge for Abraham Lincoln. That's pretty cool. And then you had the Civil War going on, of how there was a lot of intentions of Civil War, of how people are going to split from the United States and create their own country or whatever, called the Confederate States of America. And they were like, if Abraham Lincoln wins, we're splitting, but if any Democrat wins, then we're probably keeping. And then you had this underdog. Abraham Lincoln was an underdog. Lincoln wasn't in most Southern ballots. And the ballots that he was on in the South, he got 0.1 or 0.3, less than 1% of the popular vote. But luckily, though, the North has most of the population in this world, and they overwhelmingly went with Lincoln. Now, Abraham Lincoln's not president, and then there became a Civil War. And so then, in my opinion, 1860 I love the election of 1860. There was a divide. America was divided. It was so high tense that whoever won, it could have changed America, and obviously it did change America. The candidate I wanted to win won. Abraham Lincoln being my favorite president is absolutely amazing. And then you have a guy who lost a senator's race and got revenge on a guy who he lost against in the Senate race for Illinois. So that was kind of a revenge story. But yeah, definitely 1860 is definitely my number one. 2020, 1860 could go back and forth, but I feel like America back then was more divided than it is now in 2020. I get America is definitely a little bit divided, to say the least, actually. But it was way more divided in 1860. I mean, so much so that in 2020, you're not talking about, oh yeah, this state is going to concede from the states and create their own country. No. But that was definitely a possibility in the 1860 election, and there was happening. Civil War. Now, those are my top 6 favorite elections of all time. They're also known as the craziest election, which actually makes it better. But yeah, definitely top 6 favorite elections of all time. Let me know what's your favorite election of all time. It doesn't have to be highly intense. You can say if you are a Democrat, then you could be like, oh yeah, Barack Obama's election. But yeah, I'm probably maybe tomorrow I might go with a top 10 or top 11 most influential presidents of all time. I might have to make a couple of changes to my list, but of course, guys, have an amazing day.